Alright, here we have a video called Christianity Makes a Lot More Sense Than I Expected. And it's about how being a Christian's kinda good and being an atheist kinda sucks.
So I used to be an atheist.
Oh, and he plays Minecraft the whole time. I thought about replacing the background with something more interesting like a black screen, but I don't know, I guess it does suit the vibe.
So I used to be an atheist for the past 23 years of my life. And then recently I converted to Christianity.
My sympathies.
Now, why I converted I don't want to go into now, but...
Oh, I would have liked to hear that part. How about instead we just talk about nothing for the next few minutes? That sounds relaxing, actually.
I want to speak a little bit about what I think of atheism and a couple things that actually really bothered me about it, even while I was an atheist.
Things that bothered you about it. Well, that could be interesting. It could mean several things. It could mean things that shook your confidence in strong atheism, things that made you question the justifiability of weak atheism as a viable position. A lot of us probably remember Kevin Berger and his argument that lacking belief isn't even a thing. Maybe he got a hold of you and convinced you actually do believe there's no God, and then you realized you couldn't justify it. Or it could be things about it that bothered you, like emotionally. And that's fair enough, I think. When people talk about that stuff, I think it can be valid. The only time I can think of when I usually find that really irritating is when people present it as the reason for believing in God. Like, there not being a God made me feel sad, so I believe there is one now. But having some negative emotional response to a reality without a God, or at least a reality not apparently containing one, is valid, even though to me it's utterly incomprehensible.
So, to give a little context, I have a really good friend that for all his life was a Christian. And I really liked talking to him, and I still like talking to him, obviously.
It's not so obvious. Maybe his tongue fell out. Actually, no, I guess then you could still talk to him. Alright, you got me. You're a clever one. I'll have to be careful with you.
And one thing that always stuck with me, and that kinda I was even envious about, was his conviction. Because when you're an atheist, really all you have are arguments.
I mean, that sounds pretty good. But no, obviously atheists have conviction in things. Very often even conviction in atheism itself. It's not like you're necessarily stuck having arguments internally. You might be, some people do that to the point of it being a problem, even, I'm sure. But typically if you're making arguments, you're doing that because you're arguing with someone who disagrees with you. That's the context where arguments become like a central thing. That's not like the nature of being an atheist. It just oftentimes tends to be a big deal when you're talking to, in this case, theists. It's kind of odd. This is the kind of criticism I would expect to hear from someone on the outside, who only sees like atheists on YouTube, but doesn't actually experience the mental state of being an atheist. It's the criticism of a person whose only experience with atheists is seeing them argue with Christians. So hearing this from a former atheist is a little weird.
Really, all you have are arguments about, or rather, is lack of evidence. That's really all you have as an atheist, right? It's not that you have proof that God does not exist. You just have no proof that God exists, therefore you don't believe in God.
Okay, well, sure, the lack belief atheists might lack conviction that there's no God, so that's not one of the things they would have a feeling of conviction about. But that doesn't really say anything about whether they do have conviction about other things. They, of course, can have conviction about things. They can even have a strong conviction that the position of lacking belief in a God is the most reasonable position. A lot of people hold that view very strongly. Conviction in the reasonableness of lacking belief in God. And the lack of conviction specifically in God's existence in no way needs to result in a feeling that something's missing, in some God-shaped hole in your convictions. Tell me what's in your neighbor's closet right now. I'm going to assume you haven't rummaged around in there recently, hopefully. So do you have some deep feeling of conviction that you know what's in there? Probably not. And does this have some negative emotional impact on you? Well, no. Almost certainly you didn't care at all before I brought it up. You probably barely care now. And that's kind of the position that I'm in, for example. Nothing's missing. I have strong beliefs about many things. I just don't have a strong belief that God is real, and I don't especially want one. I don't see a reason to worry about not having that conviction specifically. For that to feel like something's missing that shouldn't be missing, I would have to see this question as unusually emotionally important to me, and I don't. And also, honestly, even if I did have more of an emotional investment in the question, I can't understand being envious of someone for just thinking they have it figured out, regardless of whether I think they have. This is what you said, that you were envious of your friend's conviction in Christianity. And personally, I don't even understand the emotional appeal of feeling conviction about things, because what does that feeling actually do for you? What does it actually get you? Is it even a positive feeling? Like, it's not the same as happiness. I don't associate it with any obviously positive emotion. It's just kind of thinking you have the answer, and then I guess if you have other questions, you can go deal with those. So I suppose, like, practically it frees up some processing room in your head or something, but that's about it. But then again, I'm the kind of person who's extremely comfortable with uncertainty and the lack of knowledge, at least on these kind of questions. So maybe I'm an outlier on that one. I don't know. I can only speak for myself. And speaking of myself, another thing you said here is that all you have as an atheist is a lack of evidence. You don't have any proof that there is no God. Well, for my part, I left behind lack-theism a long time ago. I'm quite confident that there is no God. I find my reasons for that good enough to think it's reasonable, at least to think I'm more likely right than wrong, and in fact by a fairly significant margin. I have enough confidence in this position to have no worries about the alternative. So your claim that this convictionless lack-theism is just how it is and must be to be an atheist fails immediately from my perspective. Obviously, even on the God question, an atheist can have conviction. On all questions, an atheist is just a normal person, just like the Christian, who can feel confident in answers that they believe are correct. And if you never realized that in 23 years as an atheist, then I'm sorry, but you don't seem like you've thought that hard.
Right. I think that is essentially the premise of atheism.
Well, sure, the premise of atheism is not believing there's a God, but it's not having no conviction or having no conviction on the question of God. Those are not part of the definition. Those are not required to be an atheist. The thing with that definition of atheist, of lacking a belief in God, is that it's very minimal, it's very restricted, and everything else can vary. So no, this you must only lack belief, you must have no conviction. No, that is not the premise of atheism. Nor is you must live a life of obsessing over arguments about God. As you put it, as an atheist, all you have are arguments. No, you can argue if you want to. That's not all you have. And again, arguments aren't even part of the definition. Whether you argue all day, every day, or have no idea what an argument even is irrelevant to whether you're an atheist.
Now, what do Christians have? Well, they have evidence, or they think they have evidence of a God, right?
I guess. You might not be familiar with that word or what it means or the concept itself, but at the very least, I guess you have some kind of a feeling that you take to mean that the thing is true. So in that sense, sure. And so if I'm understanding you correctly, this is better because it's better to feel like you have evidence than to feel like you don't. Except what if you actually don't, though? Would it still be more desirable to think you do? I personally have a big problem desiring that at all, but it seems some people do at least think it sounds preferable, which is very confusing.
But they also have God's revelation, right?
And that's another point in its favor. That makes it even better than just thinking you have positive evidence for some position, which atheists definitely cannot have or feel. I don't understand what you're trying to say here. Christianity feels nicer because religion has religious stories? I'm not seeing how this is going to make Christianity look better.
For example, if you hear a testimony of a Christian, then you usually hear like that they had some situation going on, right? Usually kind of a bad thing. And then God revealed themselves to them.
Aha, so maybe not revelation like the book, like the stories, but God literally revealing himself to you in some way. In this case, after kind of a bad situation thing, which they then tell you all about in a testimony. Well, yeah, in some kinds of Christian, that kind of story is going to be damn near universal. And a pretty big chunk of them are going to be supposed former atheists, too. You're supposed to come up with bad stuff from before you became a Christian to show how much Christianity improved you and improved your life. That's part of the fun and the propaganda. I'm still really struggling to see, maybe even more so now, how this revelation is such a wonderful, desirable improvement.
And then their stress, their anxiety was lifted, and they felt like a burden was lifted off of their hearts, right? Off of their shoulders.
Right, so they had kind of a bad situation thing, and then God revealed himself somehow, and then they felt better, so they say to all the people at church and people who they're trying to convert and their friends who they're definitely not trying to convert. And hey, I'm not saying they're necessarily lying. I think the religion is made in such a way, like all religions, that people feel nice when they fall into it. Or at least that's an intended feature that works on a lot of people. But I also think it's very convenient, and again, very intentional, that these personal emotional effects are talked about so heavily and pushed so much in the marketing. There's been a long time to figure out what sells, what stuff you should lead with. And, just like with marketing anything else, even things that may well be true features of the product can be exaggerated a little bit.
And you do not have anything like that in atheism.
Well, there's not a whole lot in atheism itself. Atheism itself is just not believing in God. If you're looking for some stress-relieving practice or belief, that'll be found beyond atheism itself. That doesn't mean you can't have it as an atheist. It can be compatible with atheism. I just mean that random beliefs and practices that you might fall into are not themselves atheism. But, you know what's very funny, is that you can also listen to stories from atheists. They have stories too, and many of those atheists were religious previously, and many of them will tell you stories of all the stress and anxiety and pain and misery that their religion or their theism directly brought them. It's really funny that you say that in atheism, there's nothing like this stress and anxiety relief when there are so many people out there for whom just losing the tormenting belief in the Christian God was what relieved their stress and anxiety. These kind of stories go both ways. People have different needs, different paths, different problems, and different things will make different people feel different ways because people are complicated. Now, you seem to be listening to a lot of Christians telling you how they feel about things, which is fine, but you seem to be essentially ignoring the atheists. You're acting as if their experiences are something you haven't even considered might be possible. Interesting.
So it's essentially a personal proof that God exists.
How? Lay out that argument for me. I'm really curious.
Right? That is essentially what it is.
It doesn't seem like it, essentially or otherwise.
And, my friend also had something like that, and that's how he essentially really came to his belief, like how he really solidified it.
Yeah, I'm absolutely not surprised to hear something like that. This is pretty standard Christian stuff. It's a big central part of the narrative. And hey, maybe in your friend's case it happened exactly like how he says it did, and it really was just as bad beforehand as he's portraying it. I'm just saying that these kind of stories are a dime a dozen for a reason. Adherents are encouraged to have them and to tell them, explicitly for the purpose of converting other people, which, considering my understanding of the timeline so far, may have worked on you. It's not for no reason that this is the standard approach. It works on, well, frankly, weak-minded people.
And man, I was always kind of envious of that, because it's like, as an atheist, you, by definition, cannot have anything like that. It's impossible.
Anything like stress and anxiety relief, a rough patch in life that gets better, maybe something that makes it better. You cannot have anything like that as an atheist by definition. Apparently. Stress relief? Impossible. Things that make your life better, make you feel better? Impossible. That's the definition of atheism, guys. The fact that these kind of things are going to be a factor in basically everyone's life, atheist, Christian, or otherwise, you're going to go through these phases, through these kind of events, no matter who you are. Just ignore that. Pretend this is definitionally impossible for atheists specifically. And once you think like that, you'll have a good, healthy envy for your Christian friends. Listen to yourself, man. Does this really sound believable to you? Or, since you're a Christian now, are you just trying to make Christianity sound better by comparison, regardless of whether it's true? If so, this does not seem like the way to go about it.
Like, anything that is close to a miracle would suggest to you that, atheism is wrong, and therefore your whole world belief is wrong. That's the scary thing, right?
Well, first off, no. Seeing something happen that I don't know how to explain, or even that I think can't be explained through physics, for example, would not mean atheism is wrong, because that doesn't imply the existence of a god. It implies the existence of, at best, something like magic. or ghosts, or who knows. And that's assuming I'm dumb enough to think that I can't explain it means it's impossible to explain physically. But in this case, we're not talking about that kind of thing at all. What we're talking about is someone joined a religion and liked it, and they claim that it made them feel better about something in their life, which if we take that as true, which in many cases it probably is just a normal human reaction. This is not a miracle. How is this a miracle? And how on earth would anything like this be definitionally prohibited by atheism? I joined a running club and all of a sudden my whole life was better. My stress melted away with every kilometer. I made such good friends and suddenly felt like I had a community and I could feel the warmth in my heart. Nope, sorry, that's an obvious miracle. There's no way to interpret this as anything other than a supernatural occurrence. This is a straight up suspension of the laws of physics. And since only God can do that, you can't have that as an atheist. Fuck you.
That kind of always frustrated me as an atheist. And atheism as a whole is simply so unrewarding. It's so unhopeful. It's so unrewarding. It's so unfulfilling.
Unhopeful, unrewarding, unfulfilling. Look, yes, you're right that not believing a claim, just that, nothing else, probably is not going to fulfill you or give you hope or any of that in and of itself. Because just not having a belief is not how you get those things. You get those through other things that you do and feel and think and participate in your life. You were expecting to get these from atheism? What rewards were you hoping to get from atheism? If you want rewards, pick your atheist ass up off the couch and go do something with some prospect of reward. Like, I get rewarded for doing this, but this is not atheism. This is making YouTube videos. Because of this, I've ended up married, I have kids, I'm self-employed. It's great, I really like it, I'm really satisfied with the state of things. But that state of things was not caused by atheism, because sitting around just not believing stuff is not going to lead to any of that. How delusional would you have to be to think it would? No, if anything, there's only one reward for being an atheist, and that's just being right. The reward is being in the most truthful position possible with regard to one question. And in a way, this kind of is a good reward for people who care about that kind of thing. And in a way, living by truth can be also hopeful and fulfilling. But for someone who doesn't find the truth especially important, then I can see that it maybe is a little underwhelming. And regardless if that was all you had, if you had nothing else but just not believing in God in your entire life, yeah, I can see how that would feel like a very barren and miserable existence. But you don't only have that. No matter who you are, no matter what you do, that's not all you have. If you want fulfillment, behave in a fulfilling way. Do something to make your life full. If you want hope, then do things that create hope. Rig things in your favor and the favor of other people. Do something to improve yourself, to improve the world. Whatever that means to you, do it. But my message here is one of personal responsibility, not of being handed everything on a silver platter. You're going to have to take responsibility for guiding your future in the direction you want it to go, for making incremental improvements, even for taking risks that pay off, and for building an attitude of shrugging things off when they're not quite working. Friends and family are useful, but ultimately you are your own project. And you're not just going to have some external, all-powerful being come in and fix things on your behalf. And that's the problem, isn't it? The reality that you are your own man, that you can take ownership of your own successes and failures, that you can create your own rewards and hope and fulfillment, that you don't have to just passively receive them. In fact, that your life will probably get worse if you try to just passively receive them. That's a problem because that reality, which is how nature works, is a challenge to you. One that you have to actually step up and meet if you want to get what you want. It's active. It doesn't just tell you, don't worry about anything, God will give you whatever you want when you're dead. Which I have to say is the most miserable, discouraging thing I think I could ever hear from anyone. How do you enjoy living like that?
And it really shows when you have some kind of hardship that you're going through. And especially when you have a problem that you simply cannot solve on your own.
Very rare in reality, I would say, are the problems that you can't at least partially improve by your own action. What kind of things are you thinking of, and how is God belief going to help you with them?
That is absolutely frustrating, and not only frustrating, it's just destructive. When you have something that completely destroys your mind but you cannot do anything about it.
Okay, can I have an example? Destroys your mind, like a frontal lobotomy? That one I would give you as one that you probably can't solve, but I don't think God belief is going to get you out of it. Or what else do you mean? A situation that makes you sad? What are we talking about here?
That if you ever have had anything like that, I'm actually really curious how you stayed an atheist or if you converted or anything like that, because to me, I had that a couple months ago and it really destroyed me. It was like a couple weeks, if not months.
That's a big difference. You don't know if it was a couple weeks or multiple months? Okay, go on. I'll let you say your thing and then I'll respond.
Where I was just could not do anything. I could not get myself to do anything because I was completely wrecked mentally.
So depression? Presumably situational depression from something that happened, I guess? What happened? Did somebody die? Did you have a bad breakup? Did you fart in an elevator and everyone pointed and laughed?
And that's how eventually I prayed, and that's how I found to God.
So you felt bad about something, and then you just prayed and then decided you were a Christian. After 23 years of, well, if you were an atheist, clearly not thinking all that hard about it because you have no fucking clue what you're talking about. So I've dealt with depression. I've had bad events in my life. I've had loved ones die. I don't know what qualifies to you as completely wrecking your mind. It's kind of hard to say. You haven't really presented a standard for that. But I've had a lot of stuff where I felt pretty shitty. I also don't really know what qualifies, in your opinion, as not being able to do anything about it at all. Like, if someone dies, you can still do something about the situation in a sense. Like a couple weeks ago, as of this recording, our dog died. Everybody was devastated in the house. And at first we sat around really sad, and then I decided, you know what? I'm going to surprise them, drag them all away for a mini vacation. 2 days we went, we had an amazing time. We came back, everybody felt better. So that's one. And then the massive situational depression I was in for years in the city, I fixed by first finding a way to make YouTube work as a job, and then finding a way to get out of the city. And then after that, just diving into fixing up the house. Exerting control and improving yourself and your surroundings and everything is a great way to deal with depression, assuming you don't have some weird thing causing it that literally can only be fixed chemically, which is far from usual. And if you do, then you could go to a doctor and get that fixed, whatever that disease is or whatever that you have. Like, I'm trying to understand what your situation was, that there's literally nothing you could have done to improve it. Like, I could have my leg ripped off by a great white shark and find a way to improve my situation. Sure, I'm not going to be able to get the leg back, but I can do something, or at least have the idea to look for some way to do it and try to do it, which is still doing something. That's still an active approach. So what happened to you? What's your excuse?
Now, and I'm really fortunate for that, but I don't understand how, as an atheist, it's just impossible to kind of go on with that.
Is it though? Because, a lot of atheists get depressed. A lot of atheists go through hardships. Hell, if you listen to the Christians, apparently a lot of atheists end up atheists because of hardships, and then stay that way while still having the hardships. In other words, they go on with that, which is impossible. I really wish you would be more clear specifically what you're talking about. Unless you're talking about being literally demon-possessed, I'm having a whole lot of trouble seeing this as something that can't possibly be endured or dealt with if you're an atheist.
Of course, you could raise the argument here to say, oh, well, there you have it. Christianity is a great coping mechanism, but nothing more.
Well, I don't even know if it's a great one. I guess for some people, but then for other people, it absolutely doesn't work. It kind of depends who you're talking to. I'll at least give you that it's a coping mechanism.
And, that's exactly what I would have argued as an atheist in the past as well, right?
Perhaps. I must admit I'm a little bit skeptical if that would have happened. Considering that you seem to have difficulty understanding what atheism even is, I'm a bit dubious of this entire scenario that you're presenting, honestly.
To that I thought, why then is Christianity such an exceptional coping mechanism if it really is one?
Is it? When you say you thought of this, did you think of it now or did you think of it before when you were an atheist? I'm just trying to understand the timeline.
Because you could also make the argument, well, if I was an atheist and I was having this hard time, why would my mind not just, right? Because if it is a coping mechanism, then that means God is simply an illusion created within my mind. Now, in that case, why? Why would an atheistic mind conjure up a God?
I don't know, man. Maybe because you've been talking too much to your Christian friend who's been putting weird ideas in your head, and then you're feeling desperate about this vague, bad feeling that you're having, and so your mind is flailing around, grasping for anything anyone implied recently might help you. But that's you. The way your mind is grasping around, the ideas that you're latching onto, these are not things that happen to everyone just because they happen to happen to you. My mind never did that. My wife's mind never did that. As far as I know, my parents' minds never did that. At least they never said anything about it, and they never bring up anything like that. None of my atheist friends seem to have this issue. None of the atheist YouTubers I've ever met said anything about it. But maybe they just won't admit it, right? Maybe it's all a big conspiracy of silence. Maybe I'm just lying, and every time I feel kind of bad, I start thinking about God and Jesus. I start catching my feet trying to carry me off to church. Well, no, that doesn't happen. Look, nobody's going to dispute that a central design feature of Christianity is to make desperate people feel like they have something to grasp onto. That's a big aspect of how this religion is set up to go viral. It's set up to take advantage of human desperation and misery, and the high emotionality and lack of clear thinking that tends to come along with it. This is not a point in favor of it being true. And yes, for the right person at the right time, that will work on them even if they're an atheist. But not everybody's the right person at the right time. In fact, most people who are atheists are not the right person at the right time. When atheists get sad, they don't just randomly start thinking about God as some default action. This is not some universal feature of the atheist mind. Again, you're taking your experience and trying to generalize it onto this entire group. It doesn't make any sense.
Because obviously that comes with rules, it comes with commandments, it comes with responsibilities that you now have to adhere to.
Wait, you weren't just conjuring up God, you were conjuring up a whole list of rules and commandments and responsibilities at the same time? This just all came to you with no influence from outside. You definitely have not been talked into this. Okay, whatever, sure. Well, in that case, so what? You hear, oh, it'll fix all your problems, you'll feel so good, everything will be wonderful, you'll have so much hope and fulfillment and whatever bullshit. You hear this from your Christian friend, you hear this presumably from other places too. You're envious of how hopeful and fulfilled your Christian friend says he is. And then at some point you feel really, really bad for some vague, undefined reason. And so your subconscious mind goes, oh my God, I'm drowning, I have no idea what to do, I need a life preserver. Maybe that over there, that could be one. If that's not the extent of the thinking, then what was it? Sitting down at a desk and rationally going through the pros and cons, making checklists to compare Christianity against other religions and non-religious ideologies and whatever, to figure out which one has the fewest commandments and the least? No, obviously not. What a completely meaningless objection. And also, I don't know what kind of Christianity you're going for, but in many of them, you don't have to adhere to any rules or responsibilities, really. You have to believe in Jesus. Everything else is kind of optional, because the really important thing is just to get you in the door. And I think that even before all of this, you were probably aware of that.
It comes with responsibilities that you now have to adhere to, which you don't have to if you can't stay an atheist, right?
Well, no, actually. I mean, seemingly if you want hope or fulfillment or what was the other one? Reward, right. Apparently, as an atheist, if you want these things, you're not going to be able to just get them. You're going to have to find some way to achieve them or obtain them yourself. And same with things like coping with your feelings. You're not going to have this exceptional coping mechanism that just fixes everything. You're going to have to just learn to deal with things yourself and become stronger as a person. And you're going to have to also deal with, as you said, your own stress, anxiety, burdens, without this coping mechanism. And according to you, that's incredibly difficult. In fact, impossible to sustain, which according to you then makes it dramatically more difficult than Christianity, regardless of any rules or commandments. So what I'm trying to tell you here is you got to keep your presentation straight. What point of view do you want to go with? Is it that atheism is impossible to live with? It's just too hard for a human to do. There are just so many rules and things you have to think and believe, things you're forbidden from thinking or believing, so many mental restrictions and responsibilities that you just cannot handle. We're going to see even more of that stuff later. And Christianity is so much easier and better in every way. Or that it's odd that an atheist would even consider Christianity as a way out, because Christianity is so hard, and it puts so much on your shoulders, so much responsibility, so many rules. How about we stick with the first one, that Christianity's the easy way out? Let's maybe explore that more fully before we move on to its complete opposite, which is Christianity is the difficult path.
So why would it take a God for me to essentially reduce my stress and remove my anxiety.
Why would it take a God as in to the exclusion of anything else? Like only God would have worked, nothing else would have, is I think what you're trying to say there. Well, I don't think nothing else would have. I think that's silly. Maybe nothing else you tried did, but that's a completely different thing. The fact that you settled on God as a solution doesn't make God the only possible solution. It just means this is the thing you glommed onto to try to make yourself feel better, and it happened to work. And that's assuming, of course, that there's absolutely nothing else to this story. Like, for example, that there were 6 months between when you prayed to God and when you stopped feeling bad. Or that you were a shut-in for 6 months, and then once your friend managed to convince you to try Christianity, you went to church and were surrounded by a bunch of people telling you all kinds of positive stuff, and then felt better. You know, if these were things that happened, these would be very important details to include. You're trying to make it sound like you were at rock bottom, and then you prayed to Jesus and immediately everything was better. There were no further steps in that process. You didn't have to wait after that. No, it was the converting to Christianity that did it. Definitely nothing that came after that point, like dealing with the problem, processing it mentally, time healing all wounds, as they say, social interactions helping you feel better. Nope, it was the Christianity, 100%. That's all it was. You don't explicitly say that it was as immediate and obvious as that, which makes me think it probably wasn't, but you do present the timeline as if that's kind of how it was, which is very typically convenient storytelling for these testimonies. There is a tendency for these kind of things to be left out or conveniently forgotten, because the influence of Christianity is clearly far more important than any of those insignificant details. And even if a time gap or other factors are acknowledged to potentially have been helpful, unlike in this case, usually some way is found to tie them into the Christianity as well, to find some way to attribute any positive results of those to Christianity itself. Because the point of the story needs to be that all the help came from Christianity. Otherwise, what's the point of telling it, right?
Why would that be the case? If it's merely a coping mechanism, then surely there's a simpler way.
Well, this is a pretty simple way. This doesn't seem all that complicated. But yeah, there are other ways to cope. If you're feeling like you need to cope better, there are other ways to cope better. You just went with this one, and because you went with it, you decided it was the only possible one. Or at least that any other possible way is somehow more complicated than this already apparently very complicated way. But you haven't given me any reason to think that's the case, even in your specific case, let alone as a general fact. So why would I think it? Why do you think it?
And remember, as an atheist, there is a lot of friction to convert to Christianity.
Well, in the sense that you don't already believe that God exists, but other than that, not really. The process itself is very streamlined. This is not the same as converting to Judaism.
It's not something you do I guess today I'll just... no, you don't do that. It takes a lot of force, right?
Force? No. If you're being forced, something's going horribly wrong. In your case, to be perfectly honest, it sounds like what it took is being really naive about what your position even is and why you hold it, really not having given it much thought, not really having any clear reason why you're in that position, and then being really gullible, really open to suggestion, a bit soft and emotional, and then having the idea slowly put into your head in a way that appeals to you in that way, and then finally a little bit of desperation where you're feeling really bad and you're looking for any sort of emotional balm that you can find, which conveniently, your friend has already set you up to think Christianity does really well. All of this seems like just you're operating on feelings, and you're very willing to fall for other people's suggestions. The critical aspect of this seems to be almost entirely missing. The title of the video is Christianity Makes a Lot More Sense Than I Expected, but you're not really talking about how it makes sense so far. You're talking about how it's emotionally appealing. That seems to be by far the main thing that you're focusing on. You weren't forced to believe. You were just kind of, led, to put it kindly. And it doesn't sound like it was a very high friction process. You seem like you kind of just went along with it like a dog trained for a leash.
And so, if there is a simpler way, a simpler illusion, if you will, for an atheistic mind to, go through and pass through that mental gutter and, be happy again, essentially, then surely there's an easier way.
And so your implicit claim here is that there's not one. Okay, so what ways have you considered? When you say that there are no easier ways, what are some examples of ways that you consider not to be easier? Again, it'd be really nice to know kind of at least the category of thing that you're talking about that happened. If, for example, it's that somebody you love died, my suggestions would be very different than if, for example, you're trapped in a dungeon. These things are kind of context-based, and I don't have the context, which does seem like a big failure in the original video. It's so incredibly vague that I have really no idea what this crucial aspect of it even is. But okay, let's say it was a death or a breakup. Well, I can think of a much simpler way to fix your sadness about those events than converting to Christianity, which is just wait a while. Be sad for a while, mourn, and eventually you'll start to move on. Not only is that much simpler than Christianity, but I would argue that it's most likely much more effective. Even in Christianity, you would still have to go through that same process. Christians mourn too. Christians get sad about breakups too. And believe it or not, Christians get depressed too. Now, if it's not that, if it's something else, I mean, I could go all day coming up with all sorts of scenarios that it might have been and giving you different ways to deal with it, but I don't think that seems reasonable to even have to do, so I'm not going to.
And like that is exactly the problem of atheism. All you have are these arguments. Like, sure, you can probably find like another argument, well, it's effective because of, explanation XYZ. But that's exactly it. Like, you never stop arguing.
Well, I don't. I like it. Clearly you don't. So why did you feel like you had to do it? You could have just not done it, and then you wouldn't have had to do it. You keep saying your problem with atheism is you have to argue all the time, but you can just not argue all the time. I mean, you just got done saying atheism doesn't have all these rules and commandments and responsibilities, right? Show me the commandment that says you have to spend all your time arguing about stuff. This complaint doesn't make any sense. Surely you can see this. But is that really why you're bringing this up anyway? To complain that having to argue all the time made you feel bad when you were an atheist? I don't think so, because honestly, in this case, it sounds like you're bringing this up because you want to preemptively tell people not to explain this to you. Like, you bring up all these stupid points about how weird it is that Christianity works so well and there literally is no simpler way to fix your problems. And then people are like, hey, wait a minute. And you're like, hey, the problem with you atheists is you argue all the time. You don't know when to just stop arguing. As if the problem here is the people arguing back against your idiotic, obviously false propaganda. Do you know why people like me and my commenters on, say, YouTube spend so much time arguing? It's because every day we're hit with another tsunami of this kind of garbage. It's not like we're just arguing in some abstract sense with some vague concept. We're arguing with you and people like you. You are arguing right now. And so we argue back, and yes, there's a never-ending stream of bullshit to argue against, from our perspective. It'd be lovely if there wasn't, if there was no argument to be had, if there was nothing to prompt it, but there is. We're not somehow unreasonable for continuing to argue against your continued argument. It's not some personal failing to not just lie down and let you argue unopposed.
That's so frustrating, because is that really what you want to do with your life? Just argument? Just argue over and over and over?
Just argument? No, obviously not. What a ridiculous idea that anyone who ever argues must do only that with their life. But yeah, I do want to argue with you, actually. I find it very annoying watching you spread sloppy thinking and complete nonsense, so I choose to engage, through argument, with the arguments you put out in the first place. And that's a problem with me, because I don't know, it's okay for Christians and not for me, or something.
Because you never, you essentially have to constantly do that, unless you say, okay, well, I don't care.
Hey, atheist, you have to constantly argue, okay? That's the rules. Unless you decide not to. So in other words, you don't have to, but you can. Well, that basically wipes out everything you've said about this topic. Very thoughtful video.
Unless you say, okay, well, I don't care. I don't care. It's not that deep. Whatever. Sure, you could do that too. But, in my case, I would have to lie to myself.
You don't have to think it's not that deep of a topic to not argue about it constantly. That's obviously not a requirement. You could say, for example, wow, that's a really deep topic, but I'm not going to talk about it because I have other things to do. Or on the flip side, you could also say, this is not a deep topic at all, but I'm going to argue about it anyway. You can have other positions and do other things than the one thing this guy wants you to think and do. No way, we're not restricted to the one thing this guy can fit in his tiny little pea brain? Impossible!
For example, the purpose of life as an atheist, it's very difficult to define that. Like what is the purpose of life?
The karmic cycle. Let's do that one today.
I also had like a great conversation with my friend about that.
Oh, I'm sure that was very enlightening. I mean, indoctrinating.
And essentially what we came down to, like obviously in Christianity, the purpose of life is to get closer to God, to be with God, to become more like Jesus Christ, right? Like that in a nutshell is the purpose of your life, right? To serve God. But as an atheist, what is the purpose of your life? And you could perhaps say that, I don't know, I really like programming or sports or whatever. And so that is my purpose. It's to program and to become really good and to, do all these things. Well, that can be your purpose of life, because if you, for example, lose the ability to program, like you lose your hands, or you God forbid, get blind and, you cannot program or you cannot do your sports anymore. Now you've lost your purpose of life.
Okay, then get a new one. Like, purpose of life is just a way to say your main thing. Like, what you think is the most important thing that you're doing, what you're trying to achieve. In the case of Christianity, yeah, sure, serve God. In the case of this programming guy, be a programmer. And if you can't do that anymore, do something else. You can just do things. This doesn't sound like a negative. This sounds like a positive. The flexibility to be able to realign yourself to a new goal. Christianity doesn't have that. If you're being a good Christian, your goal is only one thing. There's only one option. It sounds way cooler if you can just make it whatever you want, even if it's temporary. I mean, everything's temporary. Your life is temporary. Big deal. You're not living in the future. You're living right now. What is the driving thing in your life right now? Well, if you're going to assign anything as being the purpose of your life, at least as you see it right now, it's probably going to be that. And yeah, that may change against your will, and you might be sad about it for a while, and you might have to reevaluate a lot of stuff. It might also change in accordance with your will. People's minds change. You might be obsessed with programming for 20 years and think, yeah, this is what I am. This is the thing that I do. I'm dedicating my life as much time as possible for as long as I live to this task. And then for some reason you stop liking it. You find something else that you're more passionate about, and you start spending more time on that instead. And eventually you realize, I'm not the programmer guy anymore. I'm something else. Okay, fine, you can do that. That's not a problem. That's awesome. Go for it. Why would I see it as a problem that this is possible?
And you, by definition, cannot lose your purpose of life. Otherwise, it wouldn't be your purpose of life. And so you would now have to redefine it.
Yeah, obviously I'm not going to use a Christian definition if I want to use this term myself for something I want to express that isn't just about like Christianity. If I talk seriously about the purpose of someone's life, I'm probably not going to be talking about the purpose God imbued into them when he made them. If I talk about the purpose of life, I'll be talking about some non-theistic thing, like, for example, some objective purpose derived from natural reality, which I don't think makes a lot of sense, but some people do. The karmic cycle, like I joked about before, or maybe something like what I actually think, which is that there's no universal objective purpose of life. We don't all just have the same one purpose and that's the end of it. But to talk about any given human life as if it has a purpose is valid and reasonable because humanity assigns purpose. If I were to talk about a person's purpose of life, I would be talking about their purpose for their own life, because they're who's there to ascribe purpose to it. Life does have purpose assigned to it. Individual humans have a feeling of purpose. That's kind of a very deep psychological fact about us. So I can't say that this purpose is not a thing. Individual human lives are put to a purpose. Those lives can even be created with a purpose by other humans. But this isn't what Christians want to hear. They don't consider it good enough because it doesn't involve their God. And they don't like that the purpose a person assigns to their own life can change or be lost or become impossible to fulfill. You're thinking about this like a Christian, that your purpose of life has to be something externally imposed and permanent, some predefined built-in component of your existence that's real in some metaphysical sense, not just what you currently see as the purpose of your life. It has to basically be the same thing as the purpose of your life as dictated by God, even if we don't necessarily say the word God. And this seems to go for almost all of your thinking. It's basically built on Christian-type premises. Without God, how can I have hope and fulfillment? How can I have any feeling of meaning or purpose without God telling me what my life is for? And this is why, again, I have a lot of trouble believing this whole conversion story. Either you were extremely void of thought in your early life, or you were not actually an atheist at all, and that's just a story you're telling because it's a good testimony.
So that kind of makes purpose of life something that has to be recursive. So it's kind of like your purpose of life has to be to find the purpose of life, but then...
If you can define your own purpose, that does not mean that your purpose of life has to be to find the purpose of life. Being able to set your own goal doesn't mean you objectively must choose this absurd one. This whole video is a string of nonsense claims backed up by nothing.
That obviously also doesn't work because we would have found the purpose of life because we just found a definition for that. So,
all right, he's just rambling now. This is dumb. But I want to mention one last little thing here, and that is that before you were asking, how is Christianity such a great coping mechanism? And you were talking about how bad you felt, that you couldn't have all of these things. Hope, fulfillment, reward, and now meaning and purpose. The way you're telling the story is that you had all of these tied up conceptually with God in your head, to the point that you felt like as an atheist, you straight up were not allowed to just feel or believe in those things, despite you seeming to already kind of believe them, particularly objective meaning and purpose. So for some reason, you had these artificial mental restrictions that you'd imposed on yourself, apparently based on your extremely poor understanding of atheism and theism. And so for no reason, you were just pointlessly denying yourself all this stuff you badly wanted and basically already believed. And then to get around your own blocks, you just switched to the other thing. You switched from atheism to theism to convince yourself that you didn't have the blocks in your way anymore, to give yourself permission to think the things you already wanted to think. And then because now you could think them, you could go, oh, I can have hope and fulfillment and reward and meaning and purpose and all of this. That feels so much better. Of course you're going to feel better at that point, idiot. It's like taking a thorn out of your finger that you put there. Granted, perhaps unintentionally through your own unfathomable ignorance, but still. Look, I don't know if I believe this whole story at all, but if I do, it doesn't really speak well of Christianity. It just speaks poorly of you. It does not make you sound competent. It makes it sound like you get all up in your own head, manufacturing all these arbitrary mental blockages, and then getting incredibly stressed out when you feel like you're not properly adhering to them, according to your own rules, or that you are properly adhering to them, but you really wish you didn't have to. Somehow not recognizing that you could just ignore all this nonsense you made up, and just accept that you believe however you believe and feel however you feel and do whatever you want.
It's just like all that is atheism in a nutshell. It's you never have any real answers, and that absolutely sucks. It's really frustrating, and I've never liked that. Right.
Man, you can have whatever answers you believe are true. You can even pretend answers you don't really believe are true. That's what you did with the God in the first place that you had all this other stuff tied up with. You pretended to believe in the God so you could believe all the other stuff that was the stuff you actually wanted to believe. And when I say pretended, I mean you prayed as an atheist. That's playing pretend. So what did you need the God for? You don't need this God middleman to allow you to have answers. You can just have them. It's your mind. If you're frustrated by the rules of atheism, you're frustrated by rules you made up. These rules are not real. I mean, on the one hand, you talk about how free and unrestricted atheism is, to make Christianity seem so much harder and more restrictive by comparison, to make it seem so strange that an atheist's mind would start thinking about God in moments of stress unless it really works. But on the other hand, you're talking about atheism like it's a mental straitjacket. So much more restrictive and mentally difficult than Christianity, with a huge laundry list of things that you must and must not believe if you are one. Such as, for example, if you're an atheist, you must never feel like you have any real answers to anything. But that's not how it is. That makes no sense. If you don't believe in God, you don't believe in God. You can have everything else. You're being sold this stuff as a package. Christianity is telling you you need this whole package to have any parts of the package. But you obviously don't. You want to feel nice? You don't feel nice without some crap I don't care about? Meaning of life or whatever? Pick it out of the box. There you go. You got it. I mean, that or grow up and fucking learn to deal with reality, but I know that's a tall order.
Now, the reason I did not convert to Christianity before was actually something that I was kind of thinking of. So the reason was I didn't have a hard enough time.
Yeah, no, clearly. The way you told the story, the trigger was desperation, which is very often what is preyed upon, yes. All right, so the next part and kind of the whole end of the video is a little bit long-winded, and I don't really know how to respond to it in a way that stays interesting at all. He basically just says that he was too distracted before to think he needed God, and to realize he had to come to God, he had to go through really hard times, and then he prayed to God with all his heart, and it worked. And then he talks to the audience, hey, if you're an atheist or an agnostic, and you get into a miserable position where you don't know what to do, then have I got a life hack for you. Try praying.
Then I encourage you to just pray.
Now, it might sound a bit weird, and believe me, I thought that too.
Pray with all your heart, pray to God, and like really, it sounds weird. Like maybe you're like, oh yeah, sure, I will never do that. That's what I thought too, but I mean, just try it.
And then he says, well, you might not know how, maybe nobody ever showed you how, so I'll show you how. And then he does a prayer right there at the end of the video. And of course his prayer is that this video works on somebody.
Father, I hope this will find them, and that this will resonate with them, and that they will come to you and see your love. Amen.
So that's that, and I don't know. I mean, maybe this guy was an incredibly naive atheist who got desperate enough to join Christianity. Or maybe it's your standard issue, pretend to be a former atheist Christian testimony. I don't know the guy, so it's kind of up in the air. I would lean a bit towards the latter though, because even when this guy's talking about being an atheist, the way he describes himself thinking is basically just Christian thinking. The stuff he thinks is important is stuff that people think is important because religion says so. But then again, unfortunately, that kind of thinking is culturally pervasive. So who knows? I also like that in this video called Christianity Makes More Sense Than I Expected, at no point was there a discussion about how Christianity actually makes sense. It feeling good doesn't mean it makes sense, and this kind of straw man atheism supposedly feeling bad doesn't mean it doesn't make sense. Either there are some serious misconceptions at play here, or just a lack of concern for what words mean. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you would, please subscribe and give the video a like. Enormous thanks as always to all of my supporters on every platform. Your support is so important to my family and I. We appreciate it so much. For early access, email list.logicked.com, and I'll see you next time.